as I was doing my work, he started making uncomfortable conversations. He went on to smack me on my bum. I froze.
And then he said, and where you learn about power is in the bedroom.
The guy said, okay, we must have sex with him so that I can get a job.
The first thing that he makes a comment on is that I've got such a beautiful body. He made me fail the subject, just to spite me.
Then he said, if you don't want to be arrested, I have to sleep with you.
Say no, when you're not refusing about sleeping with me now, I threaten, I take you to police station, I deport you home.
Nobody's working, it was only me. That is why I was desperate.
When I started telling the story to friends around the school, they all thought, oh, but this happens, he's always like this. Why is nobody doing anything about it? Why is nobody saying anything about it? We can't leave this to be the way it is. A lot of women were complaining about the problem of being sexually extorted in exchange for business deals, in exchange for jobs, and there was no organization or no platform where they could really speak about these problems. And having been in the anti-corruption space, you look at what was happening and you realize that actually this is a corruption problem, but it's just that there's a difference in terms of the currency that was being used as the currency of the bribe.
I prefer to use the term sexual corruption just because the term sextortion has different connotations depending on the space you're in. But when you use the nomenclature sexual corruption, it's a bit clear. It's very obvious what you're talking about. But anyway, it's a form of corruption where sexual acts are the currency of the bribe. The way people experience sexual corruption, let's use the example of a woman wants to access a public service. So a common example that we found is women who are seeking RDP housing, and they are denied this housing because the official in charge says, if you want your name to be on the list for this housing, you have to have sex with me. In public procurements, exactly the same thing. Women-owned businesses are tendering for government contracts. They get a call from someone on the bid evaluation committee saying, if you want this contract, you meet me in this hotel for sexual intercourse.
I got to the finals of a big competition that is actually targeted at university students, so very much a part of my degree. We were all called to the head offices of one of the partner organizations of this competition. We met a gentleman who was head of the department that was controlling this competition from the side of the organization. He was in high praise of me. My achievements up to date, the fact that I was a finalist in this competition, and essentially said he saw something in me and offered almost a mentorship relationship. So I was obviously very excited, and he asked if we could meet for dinner the very next day, and I decided to go. I thought this was an incredible opportunity. And then as the night went along, it just started getting quite inappropriate in terms of his commentary. He started saying things like, it's all about I have the power and the power sits with me, and like how you get far or climb up the ladder, that's what people say, is it's all about who you know and how you use that power. And then he said, and where you learn about power is in the bedroom, is what he said to me. And I was like, obviously at this stage, I'm just smiling and waving because I don't really know what to make of what he's telling me. And then he would make comments. I had just happened to be wearing a white shirt, and he said to me, you see, you don't have to wear a white bra with a white shirt. I'm very uncomfortable, but I'm also I've heard stories about how corporate is, so a lot of my mind is just like, oh, this is just how it is. But essentially, I went home and I sort of burst into tears because I didn't understand what was happening. I thought it felt as if I had just agreed to something because I went to dinner with him and because I hadn't objected to anything he was saying. It felt as if all of a sudden I had made some non-verbal agreement to how this mentoring relationship would go on. And he had very much reiterated the idea that he was doing something for me in exchange for something. Well, he wasn't explicit, and it wasn't necessarily with any sexual undertone. It was very much, this is how I'm going to teach you and these are the things you need to know. Thank God for my parents, they also suggested that I go see a therapist, which I did about 2 days later. And essentially the therapist told me everything that happened and how wrong it was, and reminded me, because at that stage I was also still trying to justify his actions, thinking that it was normal, also because I had willingly gone to this dinner, also blaming myself to a certain extent.
What we thought would be the biggest challenge for us when we started, with speaking out against this problem was that we thought that people didn't know about the problem. So we thought that the challenge would be just really defining the problem so that people start understanding the problem. But to our surprise, we realized that people knew about the problem, it just didn't have a name.
It is actually my first time hearing it, but I kind of had an idea of what it is, but I just didn't know there was a formal term for that, Sexual corruption, you realize that as young girls and women, we are subjected to that.
We then came out as an organization that now gives people the name. They now can identify the problem and say, this is what is currently happening. And for the longest of time, when they saw the problem, they just treated it as a morality issue. But it was not necessarily a morality issue, it was a crime. And we wanted people to start recognizing it as a crime that it was. And it is a crime of corruption. Sextortion doesn't have a profile. Everyone could potentially be a victim of sextortion. And I think that's what we proved with the event today, that everybody's receiving this conversation. And we always say at Awaken, once you hear about it, you will never not see it. And I think people are starting to see that corruption transcends away from money at times, but it goes to things like sexual corruption that we don't even talk about when we are thinking about corruption.
I realized that sexual harassment in the workplace was a big problem, but I never thought of it as corruption. I never thought of it in that way. So also when it comes to females getting jobs in the workplace, I always just thought, it's a moral issue. We never really think of it as a crime, and this has just obviously broadened my horizon and broadened the way I see things now, because now I realize that, this thing is actually much bigger than we thought it is. It's actually a much bigger societal issue and a crime as well.
The perpetrators of sexual corruption are varied. So it's really anyone in a position of power who is a gatekeeper, who can approve or deny the request for access to a public service or a public benefit. And he uses that power. Rather than requesting a financial bribe, he requests from women mostly a sexual favor.
Imaqala lento le bengisihlala khona la ekhaya kwakubheda kakhulu situation ama was vulnerable, and then ngase nga-approacha one of the political leaders ukuthi ngifuna umsebenzi. So the guy said, okay, we must have sex with him so that I can get a job. And there was no parenting, I was an orphan. So I agreed. After that, we slept not once, not twice, again and again. So I started complaining because he didn't give me the job. And then he started offering money. Azangaza stop ukuthi ame lapho ukuthi angalali nami. Maqeda lapho wafike wangidlulisela komunye futhi la ngakumele ngithole khona ibhazari. Maye ngisa komunye the very same person naye wafike nabangiqala ngibamba amathanga, wangibamba umzimba wami, and then we have sex. Bese ngifonile ebusuku angibuza ukuthi ukuphi. I have no say because I need food, I need job. I started sleeping with him again. So this thing, it's continuously going again and again, didn't stop.
A lot of the time, especially when you're dealing with women who have low economic power, who are vulnerable either because of poverty or because of other socioeconomic reasons, we find that because they're vulnerable in that sense and because they have less agency because of their socioeconomic status, they are more vulnerable to sexual corruption. And what that means for them is that they are further denied, access to whatever public services they require. And if they do comply, then of course they're left with the shame and the stigma and just, the emotional problems that come with being coerced psychologically into doing something that you don't want to do.
Yeah, it's really broke my heart because I was sacrificing myself for my family to get food and to change the situation for my family.
This affected my life mentally, because it's very difficult for you to sleep with someone that you don't like, you don't love. It's the only way of survival.
We should really start by really going into the murky waters of understanding the magnitude of the problem. With the work that we have done as Awaken, and we are only 3 years old, we've already seen that in each and every community or in each and every profession where we speak about this problem, somebody has a story. And I believe that, what we should really start doing is speaking about it more, is giving it the proper language that it deserves.
It was in 2007. I was working in my first employer, where I was serving as a technician. I remember my first encounter that was a bit uncomfortable was when I was told that I had to attend a training. In that training, I'll be sharing a hotel room with my supervisor. When I questioned that, I was told that no, there isn't enough funds. So I said, no ways, I'm not going there. If the organization doesn't have money, then they must just cancel. I'm not doing that. And then the second time, I had issues with my credit score, that I wanted to purchase a vehicle and I couldn't. I asked a few friends to assist up until I got this one friend who agreed to assist me. My manager, because we could talk about everything, I told him that story, so he didn't see anything wrong, and that friend assisted me. And then all of a sudden, my manager is calling me and telling me that I'll be suspended. There's an issue that I need to sleep with him, actually. I need to sleep with him. And then when I wanted to know why should I sleep with you? I'm not going to do that. I'm married. So when I told him that I'm not going to do that, he became furious, and he told me that, remember, that friend of yours who helped you to purchase a vehicle, I'm going to change the story around. I'm going to make it look like that person bribed you and you'll be losing your job. Choose. It's either you choose to sleep with me or you lose your job. And I chose not to sleep, but I lost my job. And he told me that I'm going to make your life a living hell. And indeed, my life was a living hell because I lost my job. I couldn't support my family anymore. It makes me feel bad because in these fields where male are dominating, like your engineering and them, when women work for those departments, they are seen as sex objects. They are expected to service men and sleep with them. And it's not supposed to be the case. And they are not protected. When sometimes they report these cases, nobody cares, nobody helps them. They end up losing their jobs, like myself. It makes you to be so powerless, especially in my case, where I was educated. And this person didn't have much education. It's just that he had power, a political power. It makes you feel so useless and so helpless and so powerless.
The current legislation on sexual corruption is very patchy, I would say. So we have a number of laws that deal with specific elements of sexual corruption. but it doesn't criminalize sexual corruption in its entirety. I'll give an example. In South Africa, the Prevention and Combating of Corruption Act criminalizes, bribery and corruption, but it criminalizes both the giver of this act as well as the receiver. So in the case of sexual corruption, you can imagine that if we'll use the example that I gave, a woman who is seeking access to RDP housing, if she performs a sexual act on the official, it means that she's also now criminalized and can go to prison for doing that. So we find that legislation is not workable because, of course, if a woman is requested to provide a sexual act, she's not going to report for doing that if she knows she will also be criminalized and face jail time or face a fine.
The biggest problem with us not recognizing sexual corruption and continuously referring it to sextortion is that it gets missed within the legal cracks. If you go to any police station today and say that you're coming to report sexual corruption, it's not even there, it's not defined. So because it's not there, it's not defined in our anti-corruption policies, it's not seen as the problem that it is.
I didn't report him because first, I knew that there was no evidence. It would have been he said, she said. I didn't know how to go about reporting a very big guy at a very big corporation. I, at this point, had not even started applying for jobs. And I was just really scared about what either he could have done to me and my career and maybe stopping any future prospects, or me not being able to work for an organization that, the corporate that was and is connected to other corporates.
The fact that we're growing our daughters and the young kids, if they are growing in this environment, it becomes a problem. We need to put a stop.
The changes that I would like to see would first be legal changes, of course. I'm a lawyer and I've said that the legal framework is not adequate. So I'd like to see really the creation of a dedicated offense against sexual corruption that does not criminalize the victims. So I'd like to see more advocacy, I'd like to see legal reform, and I'd like to see more victim-centered reporting and support given to victims of sexual corruption.
We need to do something about it, and especially policymakers who are responsible for drafting our policies to understand that corruption affects or impacts different groups in different ways. And with that, we will start to also understand that when we are developing these anti-corruption policies, we develop anti-corruption policies that respond to issues on the ground. And this involves policymakers understanding issues at grassroots levels. They need to understand problems from professional levels, from leadership levels. How do all these different groups intersect with corruption, and how are they all impacted with corruption, so that when we have when we develop policies that are holistic in terms of how they are solving and responding to the problems that we have.
I suffered because I lost my job, but at the end of the day, I rose again. Yeah. Here I am, I'm standing. As a result, I started a campaign of saying, don't sleep for favors. Where I am currently, I'm working with young girls and even boys, because it also affects them, that I'm educating young people to not to sleep for favors.
I want the world to be a better and a safer place. I want women's access to opportunities, to services, not to be hampered by things like sexual corruption or to be hampered because of their gender. I don't want gender to be a barrier to enjoying a good quality of life for myself, for my daughters, for all women everywhere.